My dear friends, in an age where noise dominates and distractions multiply, there is a peculiar strength that rises not with a shout, but in silence. It is the strength of a wise woman. She does not parade her wisdom. She does not trumpet her decisions. No, like Our Lady, she ponders many things in her heart. But when necessary, she cuts, silently, firmly, with dignity. There is a certain kind of person who does not come with weapons in hand, nor with open hostility, yet their very presence disturbs the sanctuary of the soul. Their words are soft, their gestures measured, but what follows them is a slow erosion of peace. Like a serpent in a garden, they hiss doubt into tranquil hearts. They wrap their intentions in compliments, but their aim is control. A wise woman, in her silence, discerns such a soul. She does not require loud arguments to understand spiritual unrest. She feels it like a change in the atmosphere. Her spirit becomes tight, her rest becomes troubled, and prayer becomes strained. She does not always know what's wrong at first, but wisdom, especially the wisdom of a woman rooted in God, always sees in time. This type of person does not shout, they suggest. They do not force, they manipulate. They create dilemmas where there were none, turning simplicity into complexity. And worst of all, they convince the woman that she is somehow the source of the chaos they've sown. But my friends, peace is not a luxury for the soul. It is the natural climate of the heart when it is aligned with God. As I have often said, the peace of God is not the absence of conflict, but the presence of justice, order, and truth. And when peace is missing, it is not always the result of trials. It is often the result of presence. The wrong presence, a wise woman begins to notice. She is more anxious after the conversation. She guesses herself more than usual. Her joy is muffled. Her prayer time is scattered. And then she realizes, this is not love. This is intrusion. This is not care, this is confusion. This is not friendship, it is spiritual interference. And so she makes a quiet decision, not with drama, not with a bitter farewell, but with the stillness of someone who values her interior life. She steps away, not to punish the manipulator, but to preserve her soul. She does not need to explain, because explanations often fuel the very entanglement she is trying to escape. She simply returns to peace. And when she does, she finds God still waiting there, always there. Peace, you see, is not just an emotion. It is a fruit of the Spirit, and anything, or anyone, who persistently robs her of that fruit is not of divine origin. So she closes the door, not with resentment, but with reverence, and in that silence her peace returns, not as a trickle, but as a flood, and in the still waters of that peace, she can finally hear the whisper of God once again. Would you like me to continue expanding the next keynote in a similar tone and style, of course? Here is a lengthier and enriched version of the second keynote, The Thief of Time, written in the spirit of Fulton J. Sheen, elevated, discerning, spiritually grounded, and without heading. There is something far more precious than gold, more fragile than crystal, more sacred than even the finest gifts the world can offer, and that is time. God, in His divine wisdom, has given each of us a certain number of breaths, a limited number of sunrises, a fixed span of years in which to fulfill a purpose, and a wise woman knows, deep in her soul, that time is not to be wasted. It is to be offered. There are those, however, who do not treat time as sacred. They do not steal it maliciously. They waste it carelessly. And they become, slowly and subtly, thieves of what is most holy. These are the ones who call often but say little, who gather around her life not to contribute, but to consume, who speak endlessly of others but never of ideas, who have no mission of their own, and so they anchor her in stagnation. The wise woman begins to feel it. though she may not yet understand it. She feels heavy after spending time with them, as if her soul has wandered through a fog. The hours pass, but no seeds are planted. No dreams are stirred. No purpose is refined. Just words, just noise, just emptiness dressed in casual company. It is here that she begins to see there is a difference between activity and fruitfulness, between being busy and being called, between social engagement and divine assignment. And so she watches, she observes, she listens, not only to what they say, but to what remains unsaid. She realizes that these people are not malicious. No, in fact, they are often quite kind. But kindness without purpose can still be dangerous. It is not always the sharp tongue or the hostile heart that derails a woman's journey. Sometimes it is the soft voice with no direction, the friend with no discipline, the companion who fears progress and hides from truth. And so, in the stillness of prayer, the wise woman makes a decision, not out of pride, but out of stewardship. She begins to pull back. She chooses solitude over shallow company. She chooses books over babble, vision over vanity. She honors her time not because it is hers, but because it was given by God for a mission, a holy mission. And slowly the fog lifts, the hours stretch wide with meaning. The silence begins to speak louder than the noise ever did. Ideas return, purpose ignites. She finds that in pruning her circle, she has expanded her destiny. Sheen once said, "The great tragedy of life is not that people set their goals too high and fail, but that they set their goals too low and succeed." And so, the wise woman no longer entertains people who are content with the low. She gently steps away from the time thieves, not with contempt, but with clarity, because she knows one day she will stand before the author of time, and he will ask what she did with the minutes, the mornings, the months. And she wants to say not that she spent them, but that she invested them, that she used them for beauty, for virtue, for growth, for truth. And so she walks away, not from people, but from patterns that bury her light. Because in the end, she is not just keeping her schedule, she is protecting her soul. Shall I continue with the third type, the killer of dreams, in the same style and depth? Certainly. Here is the expanded version of the third keynote, the killer of dreams, written in the elevated, contemplative, and spiritually resonant style of Fulton J. Sheen. Without heading, there are few things more fragile than a dream in its infancy. It begins not in public view, but in the hidden chambers of the soul. It stirs quietly, like a flickering flame, easily extinguished by a careless word or a cynical glance. And the wise woman knows this dream may not be understood by many, but it was given to her by God, and therefore it must be protected. But there are those who, knowingly or unknowingly, make it their mission to snuff out that light. They do not raise weapons against her. They do not shout her down in the streets. No, their methods are far subtler. They scoff, they smirk, they say, "Be realistic." They speak of limitations while she is trying to soar, and with every passive-aggressive comment, they chip away at the foundation of her faith. You see, the killer of dreams is rarely a villain in appearance. They are often friends, family, even mentors, people whose voices she once trusted. But over time, she notices a pattern. Every time she shares her ideas, they respond with doubt. Every time she takes a step forward, they remind her of failure. Their advice is never to encourage, but to shrink. Never to inspire, but to restrain. And a wise woman begins to feel it in her spirit. The tightening, the dimming. She begins to question herself. She replays their words late at night. She starts shrinking to fit their comfort zones. And before she realizes it, her dream is no longer growing. It is gasping. But God does not give dreams so that they may die in the shadow of someone else's fear. He does not whisper vision into a heart just to see it talked away by the timid. And so, the wise woman, through prayer and through quiet discernment, begins to take a step back. She stops explaining herself. She stops seeking validation. She understands that some people are not attacking her dream. They are simply unable to comprehend its size. Their vision is too small to hold what heaven has given her. And so she does not wait for their permission. She continues anyway. As I have often said, the refusal to take a risk is already a failure. The killer of dreams may call it caution, but the wise woman sees it clearly. It is fear disguised as wisdom. And fear has no place in the soil where destiny must grow. She remembers the saints. Moses was told he stuttered too much. David was told he was too young. Mary was told she was too poor. But none of that stopped the work of God. Because when the Creator calls, the approval of man becomes irrelevant. So the wise woman silences the noise. She walks with those who see her potential, not just her past. She surrounds herself with people who water dreams, not trample them. And if she must walk alone for a season, so be it. Better solitude with vision than company with doubt. In this, she is not proud. She is obedient. Obedient to the God who planted that dream within her. And she knows, the same God who gave the dream will give the strength to fulfill it, if only she protects it. So she moves on, not in anger, but in anointing, because she has learned that not everyone is meant to understand the dream, only to witness its fulfillment. And when that day comes, when the dream stands tall in the light of day, she will look back and know that every silent separation was a holy decision, because destiny is too sacred to be negotiated with small minds. Would you like me to continue with the fourth type, the perpetual victim, in this same manner? Certainly. Here is the expanded version of the fourth keynote, the perpetual victim, written in the contemplative, spiritually discerning voice of Fulton J. Sheen, without heading. There is a sorrowful beauty in the suffering of the human heart, especially when that suffering is brought before God. Pain, when surrendered, becomes redemptive. Wounds, when offered, become sacred vessels through which grace can flow. But there is a different kind of suffering that does not rise toward heaven. It circles endlessly around the self. It is the suffering that refuses healing. It is the voice that will not be consoled. It is the spirit that clings not to the cross, but to complaint. This is the soul of the perpetual victim. The wise woman is compassionate by nature. She listens. She carries burdens that are not her own. She offers her shoulder freely, her time generously, but she begins to notice. Some people are not looking for healing. They are looking for an audience. They are not seeking the balm of truth, but the familiarity of misery. No matter how much she gives, how deeply she comforts, the story remains the same. A tale of how the world has wronged them and how they intend to stay there. And so the wise woman becomes weary. She begins to feel drained, not just emotionally, but spiritually. Prayer feels heavier. Joy feels dimmer. The weight of someone else's refusal to rise begins to pull her downward. And in her quiet moments, she hears a whisper from within. Not cruel, not impatient, but clear. This is not yours to carry any more. For not all burdens are meant to be borne indefinitely. Christ carried the cross once, not forever. He bore it up Calvary, not down into despair. And so too must the wise woman recognize when a helping hand becomes an enabling one. There is a difference between ministering to the broken and marinating in their bitterness. Sheen once said, "There are two kinds of people in the world, those who carry their crosses and those who drag them." And the perpetual victim does not carry their cross. They wear it like a badge, demand that others admire it, and refuse to let it go even when grace offers freedom. The wise woman sees this, and though her heart is tender, her soul is strong. She begins to withdraw, not with disdain but with discernment. She offers prayer in place of presence. She replaces her constant availability with a quiet trust that God can reach them in ways she never could. She does not condemn. She does not preach. She simply steps back so that God might step in, because she has learned that there are some battles you cannot fight for another. There are chains that only surrender can break. And if she remains too close, she may become chained herself. Her purpose is not to be a sponge, forever absorbing the sorrow of others until she has none of her own strength left. Her purpose is to be a light, warm, radiant, enduring. And a light cannot burn if it is smothered beneath the endless fog of another's refusal to heal. And so she walks away, not from compassion, but from codependence, not from love, but from entanglement, not from the wounded, but from the one who refuses the remedy. She prays for them, she hopes for them, but she understands salvation is offered, not imposed. Healing must be received, and when the soul says no to grace, even God waits at the door. In that space, she guards her spirit. She nourishes her joy. She restores her peace, and she remembers that her energy is not just her own. It is the oil in her lamp, needed for her journey, for her calling, for her destiny. Because the wise woman knows, to be a healer, she must first be whole. Would you like the final expanded section on the enemy of boundaries, in the same style next? Certainly. Here is the final expanded keynote, The Enemy of Boundaries. Written in the deep, dignified, spiritually anchored tone of Fulton J. Sheen, without heading, there is a sacredness to space. Space between what is holy and what is common, between what is invited and what is imposed. Even God, in his perfect wisdom, created boundaries. The sea from the land, the Sabbath from the work week, the sanctuary from the outer court. And yet, in the human heart, especially in the heart of a compassionate woman, there can be great hesitation in drawing such lines. She fears that boundaries may be mistaken for coldness, or that saying no may be seen as unkind. But in time, the wise woman learns, a lack of boundaries is not charity. It is a quiet form of self-betrayal. There comes a moment when she realizes that not everyone who seeks access to her should be given it. Some knock on the door of her life, not because they wish to love her, but because they wish to use her. They take her time, her energy, her openness, and offer little in return but intrusion. They do not see her soul as a sanctuary. They see it as a space to rearrange at their convenience. These are not always wicked people. They may appear kind, they may speak of affection, but over time they cross lines she never agreed to. They dismiss her convictions. They interrupt her rest. They impose their needs without discernment. They demand her presence but ignore her personhood, and slowly the wise woman feels the cost. Her clarity begins to fade. Her priorities begin to blur. She finds herself saying yes when her spirit is whispering no. She feels guilty for wanting space. She feels small for needing quiet. She feels selfish for preserving her peace. But then she remembers, even Christ withdrew from the crowds. Even he, who had the fullness of divine power, stepped away to the mountains to pray. If he needed solitude, how much more does she? The enemy of boundaries is not just the person who knocks too loudly. It is the person who refuses to acknowledge the door at all. They assume access without invitation. They press past silence. They act as though her life is theirs to schedule, their crises hers to solve, their whims hers to accommodate. And so, the wise woman does something brave. She draws a line. Quietly, firmly, without drama. She does not explain, because explanations are often wasted on those committed to misunderstanding. She simply honors herself as a daughter of God, worthy of space, worthy of rest, worthy of voice. Sheen once said, "You must remember to love people and use things, rather than to love things and use people." But many today have reversed the order. They use people to validate themselves, to carry their burdens, to be constantly available, endlessly accessible. The wise woman refuses to be used. She learns to say no, not as rejection, but as revelation. A no to them becomes a yes to her calling. A no to boundary breakers becomes a yes to her dignity. And she does not apologize, she does not shrink, because her boundaries are not walls of bitterness. They are gates of wisdom. They do not keep love out, they keep chaos from taking root. She becomes selective with her presence, intentional with her time, and reverent with her inner life. And in doing so, she does not lose people. She loses pressure. She does not become cold. She becomes clear. And the people who are meant to walk with her will understand. They will knock gently. They will listen. They will respect the sacred space she guards, because they are not interested in consuming her. They are committed to honoring her. In that space of self-respect, the wise woman flourishes. Her thoughts are sharper. Her spirit is freer. Her life becomes less crowded, but more full, and she finally sees. Boundaries are not a rejection of others. They are a declaration of the self. I am God's, and I will not be mishandled. Beloved, the world teaches women to be nice. God teaches them to be wise. The wise woman does not make a scene. She makes a choice. She does not slam doors. She walks through new ones, and in every silent cutting off, there is a louder yes to her destiny. May we all learn from her to choose peace over poison, purpose over popularity, and silence over shouting. And in that sacred silence, may we hear the whisper of God.